Have you ever noticed how most older people pick up uglier behaviors without even realizing it? It happens slowly, and most don't see it until it's already affected their relationships. In this video, we're uncovering 9 ugly behaviors most people unknowingly do more as they age. That's not a reason to feel shame. It's a reason to pause, reflect, and choose better. These behaviors aren't always loud or obvious. They're often wrapped in routine, disguised as just the way I am. But if left unchecked, they can erode relationships, dim your influence, and ironically, leave you feeling more isolated in a stage of life that should be rich with connection. Stay tuned until the end, because what you'll find in this list might not just challenge your assumptions, but help you build a stronger, more respected presence in the years ahead. You'll discover how tiny behavioral shifts can create powerful changes in the way others see you, and, more importantly, in how you see yourself. Let's get started. Number 1, a growing tendency to dwell on the negative. One of the most common behaviors that creeps in quietly with age is an increased focus on the negative. It can start so subtly, maybe with a few more complaints about the weather, the cost of things, or how things used to be better. But over time, it can shape the entire tone of how you're perceived. And the sad part is, many people don't even realize it's happening. When you spend more time pointing out what's wrong than what's right, others begin to associate you with heaviness, with gloom. Not because you're unkind, but because the emotional atmosphere around you becomes harder to breathe in. And the irony is, many older adults have so much wisdom and insight to share, but it gets drowned out by a tone that feels draining rather than uplifting. It's important to understand that this habit doesn't always come from a bitter place. In fact, it often stems from disappointment, unhealed loss, or a sense of being left behind. You may be mourning the loss of energy, of friendships, of clarity, and that grief can come out sideways through complaints, sarcasm, or criticism. But while the feelings are valid, the expression of them, especially when it becomes a default setting, can be deeply alienating. For example, when you're at a dinner with family, and the first thing you mention is how the food isn't like it used to be, or how loud the music is, it shifts the emotional tone instantly. People don't feel inspired or comforted, they feel deflated. And if that becomes a pattern, they may start to avoid those conversations altogether, simply to protect their own emotional state. What makes this behavior so ugly, in truth, is not its intention but its impact. It sends the message, however subtly, that life has more to complain about than to be thankful for. And the more often that message is repeated, the more it affects your relationships, your mood, and even your health. Because the brain, especially in older age, becomes more sensitive to repetitive emotional states. That negativity, even when casual, becomes a mental loop that shapes everything else. And here's the hard truth: the more you dwell on what's wrong, the less room there is for others to show up with what's right. The less they feel safe, welcome, or excited to be around you. It's not about faking positivity or pretending things are perfect. It's about remembering that gratitude, warmth, and lightness don't expire with age. They remain a choice, and they matter more than ever. Number 2, interrupting or dominating conversations without realizing it. As we get older, many of us carry with us decades of stories, lessons, and opinions. And that's a beautiful thing, until it begins to spill out in ways that unintentionally silence others. One of the behaviors that tends to increase with age is the habit of interrupting or talking over people, not out of disrespect, but from an eagerness to share, or from the belief that your insight is more useful than their sentence. The problem is, when this behavior becomes common, it doesn't come across as wise. It comes across as dismissive. People begin to feel like what they're saying doesn't matter, or that they're being corrected rather than heard. And that dynamic can create emotional distance, especially with younger people who are already trying to find their voice. It often starts from a place of passion. You hear someone mention a topic you've lived through or know well, and before you realize it, you're jumping in with, "Oh, I know exactly what you mean," and launching into your own version. You may think you're relating, but in that moment, the other person feels erased. Or let's say your adult children are discussing how they're raising their own kids, and before they've finished a sentence, you chime in with advice or judgment. Even if what you're saying is accurate, the way it's delivered, through interruption, rather than invitation, can make them feel like they're being corrected rather than supported. It's not about suppressing your voice or walking on eggshells. It's about learning to pause, to really listen, and to wait until someone is finished before responding. That simple shift from speaking to connecting can make all the difference in how others receive you. There's a quiet kind of power in letting others speak first. It signals respect. It shows maturity that doesn't need to prove itself. And ironically, it often leads to others asking for your thoughts, rather than bracing against them. And remember, conversations aren't competitions. They're invitations to see one another, to understand one another. When you give someone the full space to finish their thoughts, you give them a gift far more meaningful than any advice you could offer. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 2 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Number 3, speaking harsh truths without considering timing or tone. There's a belief that as we age, we earn the right to say what we want, how we want, and while there's truth to the idea, that age brings freedom. There's also a cost when freedom turns into disregard. One of the behaviors that becomes more common over time is the habit of saying things bluntly, even when they don't need to be said, or when they could be said with more care. You might think you're just being honest, or that you're helping someone see the truth. But to the person hearing it, it can come off as cutting, dismissive, or even hurtful, especially when it's about sensitive topics like appearance, career choices, relationships, or lifestyle. And over time, this kind of unchecked bluntness can push people away, even those who love you. It often sounds like this: you've gained weight, that haircut doesn't suit you, or that idea will never work. You may not mean to be unkind, but when truth is delivered without softness, it loses its value. It becomes criticism instead of guidance. Somewhere along the way, many people begin to believe that younger generations are too sensitive, and that the problem lies in them, not in how things are said. But consider this: if people consistently react poorly to your words, perhaps the message isn't wrong, but the method is. Tone matters, timing matters, and most of all, intent must come wrapped in compassion if it's to be received. Take a moment to recall the people you respect the most in life. Chances are it wasn't just what they said that stayed with you, it was how they said it. Their words had weight not because they were harsh, but because they were spoken with care. There's strength in restraint. There's wisdom in knowing when not to speak, and even greater wisdom in choosing how to speak when the moment calls for it. It's not about being silent, it's about being strategic, thoughtful, and kind. Because in the end, the people around you won't remember every opinion you shared, but they will remember how they felt when you spoke. Did they feel encouraged, or did they feel judged? That feeling stays with them longer than any truth ever will. Number 4, becoming increasingly judgmental about others' lifestyles. As the years go by, it can become surprisingly easy to fall into the habit of judging others, especially when their choices look nothing like the ones we would have made. Whether it's how someone dresses, the way they speak, who they marry, or what they believe in, that voice of internal judgment tends to get louder with age, often without us even realizing it. This behavior usually doesn't begin with bad intentions. Often it's rooted in a desire to protect values we've lived by for decades, values that helped us survive tough times, raise families, and build lives we're proud of. But the world changes, and when we treat every new idea or unfamiliar behavior as wrong, rather than simply different, we risk becoming emotionally rigid and harder to connect with. You might hear yourself thinking or saying things like, "Back in my day, we would never have done that," or "They don't know what respect means anymore." And while those statements may feel like truth to you, they often signal to others that you're unwilling to adapt, to listen, or to let them grow in their own way. One example: a 65-year-old man named Walter told his daughter, who had just become a vegetarian, "That's ridiculous. You need meat to be healthy." He didn't mean harm, but she felt dismissed, unheard, and frustrated. What could have been a supportive conversation turned into distance, all because his worldview couldn't flex enough to make space for hers. The thing is, people are not problems to solve. They're human beings to understand. And every time we lead with judgment instead of curiosity, we miss the chance to truly see the person in front of us. You don't have to agree with everything, but a gentle curiosity asking, why do they see it this way, instead of rushing to condemn, can transform your relationships. It opens up space for mutual respect and often surprising connection. Judgment shrinks your world. Curiosity expands it. And at this stage of life, the last thing we need is a smaller circle, fewer conversations, or more walls between us and the people we love? If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 4 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Number 5, refusing help even when you need it. One of the most stubborn behaviors that creeps in with age, almost without warning, is the refusal to accept help. It's subtle at first. You might brush off someone's offer to carry a heavy bag, fix something around the house, or drive you somewhere. And it sounds noble, independent even. But over time, this resistance can become isolating. You see, we grow up learning that strength means doing everything ourselves. That needing help somehow makes us weaker, less capable, or worse, less respected. But here's the truth: as we get older, real strength starts to look very different. It's not in how much we can lift or how long we can drive. It's in our ability to adapt, to accept love in action, and to let others in. When you consistently push help away, what you're really doing, though you may not mean to, is rejecting connection. You're saying, "I don't want to need you," when the people in your life are saying, "I want to be needed." Whether it's your children, your neighbors, or your friends, the people offering help aren't doing it out of pity. They're doing it out of care. I once knew an 82-year-old named Harold who lived alone after his wife passed. His son would call and offer to come by, run errands, even cook. But Harold kept saying, "No need, I'm fine." Not because he was, but because he didn't want to burden anyone. What he didn't realize was that his son began to feel helpless and unneeded, and that distance grew silently between them. Letting people help you doesn't make you a burden. It makes you human. It gives others the gift of giving. It deepens trust and reminds them and you that you still matter, not just for what you do, but for who you are. The irony is, many older folks love helping others. They light up when they can share wisdom, offer advice, or lend a hand. But they forget that the younger generation feels the same way. When you accept help, you're not taking, you're giving too. You're giving others the chance to love you in a tangible way. So the next time someone says, "Let me help you with that," don't see it as weakness. See it as a moment of connection, a quiet act of love. Because aging well doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means knowing when to lean and letting that leaning bring people closer, not further away. Number 6, talking more than listening in conversations. There's a quiet shift that tends to happen with age, especially when you've lived a full, rich life. You have stories, lessons, and wisdom built up over the decades. So when conversations begin, it's easy to slip into telling mode. Sometimes without even realizing it, you stop listening and start broadcasting. At first, it feels like connection. You're being generous with your experience. But over time, if you're always the one talking, people around you may start to feel invisible. Especially younger folks who might already feel hesitant to speak. They begin to feel that your stories leave little room for theirs. And it's not just about age gaps. Even friends, siblings, or longtime partners can feel the imbalance when one person dominates a conversation. Listening is more than being quiet while someone else talks. It's an active choice to make space for someone else's world, even when yours is full. When you interrupt, finish someone's sentence, or circle the conversation back to your own experience, it sends a subtle signal what I have to say matters more. Again, not out of arrogance, but often from habit. You've seen more. You've endured more. But if that becomes the default, you lose the gift of fresh perspective. Take, for example, a woman named Janice, 74, who was chatting with her granddaughter about a recent breakup. Every time the young woman opened up, Janice responded with her own stories. How dating used to be, what men were like back then, and how she handled heartbreak. It came from love, but it missed the mark. What the granddaughter really needed was presence, not a lecture. Listening is one of the most powerful forms of respect. It tells someone, "You matter enough for me to set myself aside right now." It creates safety, and it's humbling, because it reminds you that no matter how much you've lived, there's always more to learn about others and about yourself. You don't have to stop sharing your stories. They're valuable, they're readable, they're needed. But ask more questions. Pause longer before you respond. Notice if the other person is still with you or quietly slipping away. Because when you truly listen, something beautiful happens. People open up, they relax, they trust you. And in that space, real connection forms. Not just between two voices, but between two hearts. If you're still watching this video and finding these insights valuable, please comment number 6 below to let me know you're here. And if you haven't subscribed yet, I recommend you subscribe and turn on the bell so you don't miss any videos. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Now let's move forward. Number 7, making negative generalizations about younger generations. One of the easier traps to fall into with age is forming sweeping opinions about young people these days. It starts with a few observations. Maybe someone doesn't hold the door open, or they're glued to their phone during dinner. Before you know it, you've lumped an entire generation into a single judgment: lazy, disrespectful, selfish. But here's the thing, those generalizations aren't just unfair. They quietly rob you of deeper relationships and fresh perspectives that could genuinely enrich your life. Let's face it, every generation thinks the one coming after it is missing something. And it's not new. Folks in the 1950s thought teenagers were unruly and wild. In the 1980s, elders said, "Kids today don't know how to work." Now we look at today's younger adults and say the same. But every generation grows up in a different world, with different pressures, different tools, different values. They may not write thank you notes like you did, but they might donate to strangers online. They may not work the same job for 40 years, but they might be balancing 3 careers while caring for their parents and raising kids. If all they hear from you is, "back in my day," or "your generation doesn't get it," they'll tune out. Not because they don't care, but because they feel unseen. Judged before they've even had a chance to show you who they are. I remember a man named George, 79, who once told me his grandson was soft because he talked about going to therapy. George said, "In my time, we just dealt with things." But over time, George began to realize his grandson's vulnerability was a kind of strength. That speaking about mental health wasn't weakness, it was courage wrapped in honesty. That shift in mindset didn't just help George see his grandson differently. It opened the door to real conversations, laughter, shared music, even a weekend trip they never would have taken otherwise. The truth is, when you assume the worst about a whole group, you stop seeing people as individuals. And when you do that, you close off the chance to learn, grow, and bond across age, across values, across worlds. Try asking more questions instead of making statements. Invite conversation instead of criticism. When you lead with curiosity, you don't just avoid sounding bitter, you create bridges where there might have been walls. The younger generation doesn't need your approval, but they do need your wisdom. And they're far more likely to seek it if they feel respected, not ridiculed. And here's the real twist. The more you connect with younger people, the more alive you feel. Their energy, ideas, and dreams can stir up parts of you that felt long asleep. But only if you let them in. Only if you stop labeling and start listening. Number 8, interrupting or dismissing others during conversations. As we get older, we often carry a wealth of stories, lessons, and opinions we've built over decades. And while that experience is something to be proud of, it can also lead to one surprisingly off-putting habit: cutting people off mid-sentence or dismissing what they're saying altogether. It's rarely done out of rudeness. Often it comes from excitement, wanting to help, or believing you've already been there, done that. But when you interrupt someone, especially someone younger, it sends a subtle message: what I have to say is more important than what you're saying. Over time, this small behavior chips away at trust, intimacy, and mutual respect. People start to hold back. They talk less around you, not because they don't want to share, but because they feel unheard. And that creates distance, even with loved ones who care deeply for you. I knew a woman named Helen, 72, who had 3 grown daughters. Every time they came over, Helen would finish their sentences or cut in with advice before they even finished asking a question. Eventually, the visits became shorter. Calls grew less frequent. One day, her eldest told her gently, "Mom, we love you, but sometimes it feels like there's no space for our voice." That broke Helen's heart, but it also opened her eyes. She started to notice how often she chimed in too quickly. So she tried something different. She paused. She listened. She waited. And slowly the conversations came back to life. Listening isn't just about hearing words, it's about offering presence. It's about giving someone the space to express themselves without fear of being cut off, corrected, or talked over. And here's what's beautiful: when you genuinely listen, you often hear things you would have missed. A quiet pain someone's carrying, a small joy they hadn't shared before, a dream they're scared to say out loud. By listening fully, you say to that person, "You matter. Your thoughts matter. I want to know who you are right now, not just who you used to be or who I think you should be." Especially after 70, people don't always expect us to listen. But when we do, when we offer our attention instead of our opinion, it surprises them and it draws them in. That kind of attention is rare these days. In a world that moves fast and talks loud, giving someone the gift of being fully heard is one of the most powerful, healing things we can offer. It doesn't cost anything, but it creates connection, trust, and closeness that money can't buy. Number 9, assuming you already know everything. There's something that quietly creeps in with age, and it's this feeling, often unspoken, that we've already seen it all, heard it all, and learned what we needed to know. And while experience is invaluable, this belief can slowly turn into one of the most unattractive behaviors we carry without realizing it. Acting like we already have all the answers. It shows up in small ways. Dismissing new ideas because they don't fit what we learned decades ago. Rolling our eyes at different lifestyles or modern technology. Refusing to ask questions or seek help because it might make us look unsure. But here's the truth, the moment we stop being curious is the moment we start aging faster on the inside than we do on the outside. Curiosity keeps us youthful. It's not about pretending to be someone we're not. It's about staying mentally and emotionally open, even when the world feels unfamiliar. I once met a man named Paul, 78, who carried a quiet humility. When smartphones became common, he didn't grumble or resist. He said to his grandson, "Teach me how to use this. I want to understand how your world works." That simple request became a bridge between two generations. His grandson didn't just teach him to use a phone, he started calling more, visiting more, all because Paul stayed open. Now contrast that with someone who constantly says, "That's stupid," or "back in my day." Not only does that close the door to learning, it pushes people away. When we act like we've seen it all, people stop trying to share new things with us. We become known not for our wisdom, but for our resistance. But here's what's powerful: wisdom and curiosity are not opposites. In fact, the wisest people I've known are the ones who say, "Tell me more," or "I hadn't thought of it that way," or simply, "That's interesting, why do you think that?" These are people others gravitate toward, not because they know everything, but because they never stop learning. So if you catch yourself feeling irritated by change or dismissive of a new idea, pause and ask, am I reacting from habit or am I staying open to growth? Being older doesn't mean we stop evolving. In fact, the people who age most gracefully, the ones others love to be around, are those who remain students of life, even into their 80s and beyond. When we choose curiosity over certainty, we show the world and ourselves that we're still alive inside, still growing, still becoming. And there's nothing more attractive than that. Final thoughts. As we wrap up this video, take a quiet moment to think back over the 9 behaviors we just explored. Which one caught you off guard? Which one felt uncomfortably familiar? Here's the truth. None of this was about pointing fingers or making anyone feel ashamed. It was about bringing awareness to the small shifts in our habits that can shape how others experience us and how we experience ourselves. The beauty of being in our 60s, 70s, or 80s is that we've earned the right to grow on our own terms. That means we can unlearn just as much as we've learned. We can pause, reflect, and choose to carry forward only what makes us kinder, more open, and more at peace. Maybe you recognize something in yourself today. Maybe you saw a habit you're ready to release, or a new way of showing up you want to practice. If even one part of this video helped you feel more aware, more encouraged, or more empowered, then it was worth it. You're not alone in this journey. We're walking it together. Thank you for joining us today. We'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below and share one thing you learned today and how you plan to use it in your life. Your thoughts are important to us, so don't hesitate to share them. Reading your comments gives us great motivation and encouragement. If you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, please like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us continue creating good content to inform and inspire you. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to seeing you in the next video.